And with that, greetings and salutations, fellow questioners. Tonight we are going to ask, what is the truth of biblically accurate angels? Are they the Lovecraftian horror that modern art likes to depict them as, or is there something else entirely going on here? But before we get into that, you know him, you love him. He's got a haircut. It's Donny Cho.
Hi, everybody. Hello. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Donny. And of course, Donny can be, you've got your own channel, Donny Cho Says Stuff. And your new episode is on right after this one at what time?
9:45 Eastern.
8:45 Central. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. We may have to do a follow-up once we're all done with the Dogman Conference, which is this weekend here in well, technically it's Fort Worth. It's White Settlement proper, but it's Fort Worth. It's as close as you need to worry about. And while you're here, we're gonna give you a little quick Texas tour. You know, it means some Whataburger. That means you're gonna get biscuit. It's gonna be fun.
It's going to be great. I'm just hoping I don't get, run over by like a bull or gored by a wild pig.
Yeah.
Or, as long as that doesn't happen, we're cool.
Well, I think like one of the plans is that all of us, including the booze, are going to be running out to, I think Greer Island over at Lake Worth, so trying to go the whole Lake Worth monster thing. So we may be sacrificing you to Bigfoot. That'll be fun.
I'm going to put up a fight. That's all I'm saying.
And of course, if everything's fine there, you and I are going to Brown Springs. We do have a secret. We have a little surprise.
Mm-hmm.
We'll save that for later. But Monday, because you're going to be hanging around for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Monday, we're going to drive up to Brown Springs, do some videos, show you around, see how you are in the woods, the expert woodsman that you are.
Man, it's going to be an interesting time. Should be interesting.
Should be. Very interesting. On that note, guys, obviously most of y'all know them, love them. The Texas Front Porch family of shows. That's Texas Front Porch proper. Infamous Minds. You've got, of course, that's on Texas Front Porch channel. You've got Bigfoot Michigan Rob's channel. You've got Van Buren Variety. You've got the Blondes and the Booze. All the links to all of our friends are down there in the chat or in the description underneath our stuff. So if you haven't liked, followed, and subscribed over there for that content, do so. But I think most of y'all probably already are. So without further ado, unless there's anything else you want to address, Donnie, before we kick into the segment here.
No, I'm ready to dive right in.
Ready to dive right in?
I'm ready to dive right in.
Well, okay, I'll let Donnie introduce this because he's the one who sort of said, "Hey, let's talk about this." So I'll let you go.
Well, I want to rewind the clock back a bit, Jason.
Yeah.
To when we first, the first show you and I ever did together. After that show, I think the next day or the day after, you and I actually talked on the phone. And this was our first sit down one-on-one conversation, not on a podcast or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave you a little bit of a rebuke, Jason McLean.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but I was like, so you're like a biblical perspective podcaster on the paranormal supernatural world.
Yeah.
And you've done how many episodes on Nephilim? Like a bajillion? And how many episodes on angels have you done? This is literally your first episode ever.
Yeah.
Doing angels.
On angels exclusively, yes.
That, my friend, deserves a finger wag. Actually, no, you get the double finger wag. You get windshield wipers.
What? I get windshield wipers? Oh.
Take it in, Jason McLean. You've earned this.
Oh, the admonishment. I feel admonished.
This is literally your first episode ever doing angels. Wow. Okay.
So many people have already talked about this. I want to bring new things to the world. New and beautiful things, Donnie. New and beautiful things.
All right. So, without further ado, I'll let you introduce the little video I showed you, breaking
Yeah.
down angels. I guess you could tell the people at home what I showed you and what you thought of it and your analysis.
So, okay, so Donnie shared a video with me on the Christian perspective of the different angel
Mm-hmm.
types, their ranks, what they looked like, their purposes, their missions, all of it. It was like an hour-long video. The gentleman's very, very nice. I have no problems or qualms with him at all. Okay. It occurs to me, I don't have a link I have several links below. None of them are his, but it's sort of it's really, he's more of a setup. So he goes and he talks about, the seraphim, the cherubim, the oraphim, Metatron. He goes down the different levels that have
Mm-hmm.
been put out there. And yes, everything he was talking about in that video does come out of differing Christian traditions and thoughts. So it's not like he was making this up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be very, very clear. Everything I'm about to say is not on this guy. It's not even his fault. There is a lot of angelology out there that has evolved over the last 2,000 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it comes from a lot of different perspectives, and a lot of different traditions and thoughts and amalgamations and misunderstandings. So while I'm basically going, what the first 5 minutes of what I'm going to say is basically going to take everything that he did and sort of chuck it out the window, it's not his fault. So again, I don't have the link up there. Donnie, if you can grab it and throw it in the chat, that would
Sure.
be useful, because I just realized I didn't grab it, and it's like I'm an idiot for doing that.
I'll go ahead and find it. You keep.
Yeah. I'll explain here, but yeah, you can throw that out there for the folks at home. Anyway, like I said, the dude did nothing wrong. He was accurately reporting on a lot of thoughts about that exist within Christianity, right? This sort of angelology. The problem is, a lot of where that comes from is rooted in a misunderstanding of what the biblical authors were actually doing, right? Old and New Testament. First, I want to address something from the New Testament first, and then I'm going to get sort of the big eye in the room, giant spinning eye in the room. When he talks about things like thrones and powers and virtues, a lot of this comes from Paul's writings, right? When he talks about, we deal with powers and principalities, some translate as thrones, in high places or in the air. Paul in that is talking about how our real fight is not with men and is not with individual people. It's with the supernatural powers over nations and cities and neighborhoods, essentially, right? The ultimate fight is with the supernatural, not really the people in front of you. In fact, this is why, as Christians, we're supposed to look at non-Christians who are in sin with pity, because in a way, those in sin are trapped by those kinds of spirits. They do things because they're slaved to those higher spirits.
Hey,
The
I
thing
just
is,
realized something real quick. I
yeah,
can't post links. You didn't make me a wrench. You
did I not?
son of a.
Well, okay. I'll go after this video has posted. I will go back and I can edit the
Yeah.
description theoretically. So I will put that link in the thing. I apologize. That's
And to
my
be
bad.
fair, everyone in my chat is a blue wrench except you, so it's only fair.
Yeah. Hold on. Wait. Actually, hold on. Don't do it as Donnie Cho.
Mhm.
You should be able to post the rent, or you post it from StreamYard. Just go to the chats.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, you can post it right there. You'll be posting as me. See, I gave you full
Oh,
access. Don't look yet. I'm gonna have to admonish you for that. Anyway, so yeah, live chat.
okay.
He's got the link in there. When I do extract this as the video, it'll be in the description. So again, that dude did nothing wrong. The idea of there being these particular, like the powers, the principalities, that comes from Paul. But what Paul was doing was he was using Roman terms of Roman government, right? Like if Paul was writing today, he'd be like, we deal with presidents and governors and mayors and in high places, right? That's sort of what he would say. He was using Roman governmental parlance because he was writing in Greek to mostly a non-Jewish audience at that time. And so he was using terms they were familiar with as a way of saying, these are beings spiritual beings that have these sort of higher authorities, right? That does exist within this hierarchy. He was not prescribing or describing the actual structure of angelic government, right? He is explaining what he's using it as a metaphor. It's not a literal descriptor, right? And that sort of creates that first problem. Whereas we take, and that's really the fundamental underlying issue of the entire angelology that he's reciting here, is that a lot of things are taken literally and they're not understood within their cultural context. So when I mentioned the giant spinning eye in the room, right? Right now, if you were to go out there, you would see something like this when you type in biblically accurate angel, right? These spinning wheels with eyes, and usually there's a giant eye in the center and the wing and multiple wings coming out of it and lightning. And they're like, this is the biblically accurate angel, the Oraphim, right? Here's the thing. I do have 2 links below. One to one of my videos with me and Rob and Tex, talking about Ezekiel's wheel. So this Oraphim is supposedly comes out of Ezekiel 1, right? This is what everyone bases on. They say, it's Ezekiel's wheel, right? So I have an entire video on that with me and Rob, and we kind of go into a lot of detail. Michael Heiser has also done an excellent job of explaining the Ezekiel's wheel thing. Now, again, we were both looking at it from the perspective, it's not a UFO, right? And explaining that. So I'm going to allow y'all, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty detail of what's happening, you can go watch those videos after we're done here. So I'm just going to give you a very 50,000 foot view on this. Here's the issue. Ezekiel 1 is remarkably misunderstood and misapplied by virtually everyone. Everyone focuses on the wheel within a wheel, which is a very tiny fraction of the description given. They don't look at the entire chapter is essentially describing what Ezekiel sees. By the way, only Ezekiel sees this. The men with him, they don't see the vision. They hear the thunder, they hear the whirling sounds, they're afraid, but they don't see what Ezekiel sees. So it's a vision. This wasn't a UFO, some people claim. It's like, no, you miss the vast majority of the description, because in order to get a lot of ufologists take like 2 or 3 sentences out of an entire chapter's worth of description, and they're like, see, it's a UFO.
People love doing that, don't they?
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it. But here's really, and this came from the Bible Project, and honestly, it is one of the best depictions I've seen of what Ezekiel's actually describing, right? And what's happening is the cherubim are essentially flanking God's throne, and the wheel within a wheel is actually a description of chariot wheels. It is very, very common in the ancient world for gods, deities to have thrones that are on wheels. There's one image I can't find to save my life. I just can't find it. And it is of Marduk. In his throne, you see all 4 wheels, because again, they weren't doing naturalistic perspective. You see all 4 wheels and the throne guardians on either side, right? All 4 of them. The way God appears in this, in Ezekiel 1, he is saying, I'm not, Marduk isn't the God on this throne. I am. It's Jehovah, Yahweh. He's the one on the throne. That's what this message is. He's appearing in a way that when Ezekiel writes, everyone's going to understand what's happening. God is throwing down on the gods of Babylon, right? And that's what this is. He's describing a throne. And again, the cherubim they're very strange to what we would, what we think of as angels, right? And this is the thing. They're not angels. We need to put a pin in that idea for just a second. We'll come back to it. But understand the cherubim are not angels. They are throne guardians. They are the protectors of God's throne, and a sense of ostensibly of him as well. But here's the thing: the cherubim are if you look in sort of the broader context, cherubs were known everywhere, right? In fact, this is the thing: they're called the pillars of the sky because they literally are the zodiac, the north, south, east, and west points of the zodiac.
Where does that word even come from? Do you know?
What, the cherubim?
Yeah.
I think it's Ugaritic initially, maybe Akkadian initially, but it is a Hebrew word. But everyone has sort of their version or cognate of that in the Middle East. But this is when the reason cherubim are not often described, even though they're mentioned in Genesis and several places in the Tanakh, is that everyone knew what a cherubim was, right? This is what they look like. Everyone depicted them this way. Sometimes they had, again, feet like a bull. They had wings. They had man-like faces. You see these kinds of images everywhere. The cherubim, the fact that it's Leo the lion, Taurus, Aquarius, and Ophiuchus, which is the original point, right? These were celestial points. These are the 4 cardinal points on the zodiac. To the Jews, they would have called it the Mazzaroth, right? They're sidereal. They're the sidereal. Well, technically that's 13 sidereal constellations. Again, north, south, east, west, at the cardinal points. That's what is being described, right? So one of the main issues here is that we have a misunderstanding of what's being described, right? And what's being described is essentially God throwing down on the gods of Babylon with how he's appearing. Now, again, we do see similar descriptions in the book of Revelation. I'm of the opinion that probably the easiest way to describe this is everyone's like, oh, see, the Jews and the Hebrews stole from these other cultures. No, everyone had the same understanding. It was just who they put on that throne, right? Essentially, Satan was deceiving these nations. All these other spirits were deceiving these nations, and God's like, no, this is me. This is what I'm about. They had sort of it's sort of like you had the pieces, but you attributed them to the wrong person, right? So it's not just that he's throwing down on these other gods, which he is. But it's also because that's what it is. That's how he's described himself and put himself out there so we can understand him. So again, I'm not saying there isn't a hierarchy of angels. I want to say that there's clearly a hierarchy. We know that there are archangels, there are watchers, and really that's it. From a biblical perspective, that's it. And here's the thing. Let's go back to the cherubim aren't angels. They're not angels. They're spiritual beings. If you want to say that, yes, the word angel just means spiritual being on God's side, sure. Okay, fine. I think that's fair. I think that's perfectly valid. The thing is, that's not the biblical usage of the term angel. Angel is more about the job. You are the messenger of God. That's what that's about. So it's describing a function, not what you are. And this is where things get a little confused. We try to create things where there really isn't enough information, right? And so we try, and because there's so little information on a lot of this stuff, we try and we end up creating stuff where there shouldn't be. For example, going back to the cherubim aren't angels, you know what they also aren't? Not the seraphim. We have this idea that the seraphim and cherubim are 2 different classes of angelic being, and they're not. They're the same being.
And what's the difference in the word then?
That's the point. This is what we miss in English entirely. Isaiah is very high, is very high Hebraic poetry. Okay, so just like if you were to go through the Greek classics, you'd find some that are sort of lower quality, meaning very straightforward, and others that were very high, right? Like Shakespeare. In many ways, Shakespeare's English, not Greek. Like Homer is classic, high Greek, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah is classic high Hebraic poetry. What he's doing throughout the entire book is that he is creating a narrative thread that allows the reader in Hebrew to know what he's saying about Satan specifically. Okay, because this goes to one of the questions I know you're going to ask, which is, well, what kind of angel was Satan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is this thread of what we'll call the shining one in Isaiah, right? Again, this is all Heiser. Heiser did yeoman's work. He wasn't the first one to talk about this, but this is where I'm going to pull a lot of my work from, just because it's easier. And again, Heiser did yeoman's work on that, so I've done everything but a damn ad read for that man. His passing was a huge loss to everyone from a theological perspective. So if we go back to Genesis, right, when it talks about the serpent in the garden, it's there. The word that's used for serpent is a triple entente, meaning if it's a noun, it means serpent, right? But it can also mean the shining one. Okay, so if you're a Hebrew scholar, you're well versed in Hebrew, okay, what they were talking to in the garden wasn't supposed to be a literal physical snake. There was more going on. That's what you were always supposed to drag out of that, right? But it wasn't. But you were never supposed to release the serpentine idea. The idea that being a serpent is there, right? It's not gone. It was. By the way, we are absolutely starring y'all's comments for after the main point, because those are great. So yes, you're supposed to have that serpentine image in your head. Well, when Isaiah talks about Leviathan, he's using Leviathan as a stand-in for Tiamat, but he's also using it as a stand-in for Satan. Okay? Here's the thing. The reader, again, being Hebrew, would know, he's using the word Leviathan. Leviathan is our stand-in for Tiamat. We know that, right? He's also the chaos dragon, which is Satan. We know that. But they also would say, but Tiamat is called the glistening one because it's the chaos dragon. It's this, again, serpentine, shining language. When we get to when he talks about the seraphim, a Hebrew reader would go, oh, hold on. He means the cherubim, but he's turned them into serpents, which, by the way, we see with Egyptian throne guardians, right? You see, if you look at Egyptian artwork, you'll sometimes see these serpents, right? They look like cobras, but they have wings on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's doing. He's saying, those serpentine throne guardians, he's equating them to the cherubim. He's making them the same thing, which allows us to say, oh, I get it. Satan was one of those throne guardians. He wasn't creating a whole new class of angelic being. He was creating a way for the reader to understand who and what Satan is. He is a former throne guardian. It is, again, one of those little off things, probably for a conversation for another time. It's interesting that Ophiuchus was eventually rejected as one of the sidereal constellations. And and Ophiuchus actually plays a huge role in the 2017 thing. I'm doing a new video on it to explain everything. So y'all can wait on that. That's sort of a derivation, rabbit hole thing. So the Oraphim aren't a thing. It's just a misunderstanding of what those wheels are supposed to be, right? The cherubim and seraphim are not two different things. It's the same thing. But again, it's based on this misunderstanding of what Isaiah was trying to do. Because again, we're reading it in English or Latin or Greek or whatever, not the original Hebrew, where we lose all of that poetry, right? So we use So when we're coming back to angels, the question then becomes, so then what is an angel? Honestly, I think anything beyond a supernatural being or a spirit that is on the side of God, I mean, anything beyond that is kind of reaching, really. Because here's the thing, we don't really know what they look like. Every account of an angel is a human. They just look like humans. But that doesn't mean that that's what they really look like. That's just how they look when they want to, when for us to understand what they are. They take human form, and maybe they do look like again, maybe they do look like humans. Again, I don't discount visions. I don't discount, the visions of the last 2,000 years and the different saints that have written about it. I don't discount modern visions of angels. But the thing is, if you look at them, they all describe them as just looking like people, right?
Or they just don't describe
Beautiful.
them. The Bible just says what the angel actually does, right?
Correct.
Like what it's actually doing in that particular narrative, but it doesn't actually give a description, right? Like in the Passover story, the angel of death was going door to door. Bible's not describing like what the angel of death is wearing or anything, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I'll talk about all in white, right? Like there will be basic, but I mean, they're not really, that's not the point, right? The point is not to glorify the angel. It's just saying, hey, this is what's happening, right? It is to tell a narrative. That's ultimately to glorify God and allow us to understand what's happening. And it's, so we don't really know what these things look like in their natural form. We may not be capable of understanding them in their natural form, right? Honestly, they may be best understood as mathematical equations. But as far as the closest we can get, it's like, yeah, I mean, they look like humans when we actually interact with them. The things that are often described, again, cherubim, seraphim, they're the same thing, but they are clearly depicted as representing something higher. And that sort of goes back to one of the long-standing conversations that we've all had on our various channels, which is when you're dealing with the supernatural, you may be just dealing with it. You're dealing with an entire universe for whom, or that we can't fully understand, in the same way that Super Mario from the 8-bit system could never understand our reality, right? Like how would Mario describe you? He couldn't. Not really. You're too far above him. You are too different from him for him to really understand, right? So it's one of those things where it's in our desire to try and classify things, we overreach and create far more confusion. I think the purpose of an angel is far more important. They are ministering spirits. They are beings, they are spirits that are here to aid God's children, to guide us, to help us, to protect us, to give us wisdom when wisdom is needed, and protection when that is needed. I've got plenty of stories of angels showing up out of nowhere, saving people, and then disappearing. But every time they look like a person.
Let me ask you this. I have a question then. Does the Bible then make a clear distinction between like regular angels and archangels? And what is that distinction?
So yes, there is a difference, right? And that difference is that, again, it does appear to be that there is a hierarchy, right? We know that there are generals. Now, again, the question is, are they sort of like humans in the fact that we have, generals and colonels and privates and all that, and they're all basically, they're all human, but they just have different ranks. Is that what's going on, or is there an actual power difference? We don't really know, but we do know that the archangels do seem to have more power than others. There are 7 named archangels, and Michael is often seen as the prince of those archangels, but there's disagreement on that, because Michael appears the most in the texts, both Enoch and the Old Testament and the New Testament. He does seem to be the one sort of leading things, but he's also the prince that's put over Israel. Okay, we go back to the idea of the Elohim that's over the nations, the gods over the nations, right? they all side, those gods become corrupt and they side against Yahweh, against Jehovah, whereas Michael is on the side of God and he's over Israel as their prince, as their protector, right? Their spirit. Again, that's Old Testament theology, and but he's described as being the prince over Israel, and again, I think he still is, because we see him there in Daniel at the end of time, or at the end of this age specifically, watching over Israel, and that he's the one who's the angel that we see in both in Daniel and Revelation stand up and say, hey, it's closing time. It's about to get real.
So going back to that video that I showed you, where the guy
Mhm.
was like breaking down all the different types of angels and their roles,
Yeah,
was that part of the video accurate when he was describing Michael as essentially being God's personal ass kicking machine?
he's not wrong. So again,
Okay.
it goes back to the issue is there are, as far as we know, that is correct,
Mm,
right? Because every time someone needs an ass kicking, it is Michael who's showing up to do it,
yeah.
right? Whether it's the Book of Enoch, whether it's the Old Testament, whether it's the New Testament, and the Book of Revelation, when God's like, take him out, it's usually Michael showing up. Now, the thing is, there's a lot of stuff we don't know, right? There's plenty of times when others are sent to do similar things. We don't know the name of the angel that slew the firstborn of in Egypt. We don't know, who's doing what most of the time.
Hmm.
But anytime there's a named angel doing it, it's usually Michael. For example, in Revelation 19, when Satan is chained and bound, we don't know the name of those angels at all. It's just two angels. And you'd like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is Satan getting locked up and thrown into the abyss, and we don't get their names? It's literally Stunt Angel 1 and Stunt Angel 2. Satan's literally, he's not even, Jesus doesn't even address Satan in Revelation. He's just gone. He's not
And
even important enough for
they
him to
got
deal
two
with.
extras to do it.
Yeah. It's like it's the equivalent of having
Man.
two Teamsters. It's like, hey, just send a couple Teamsters. Like that's how unimportant Satan is in this whole thing, as far as his lack of power. So, but yeah, as far as anytime we have a named angel kicking ass and taking names, it's going to be Michael. But the problem is, there's plenty of times when we see angels doing stuff and we just don't get their name.
Hmm. A lot of times. And then the other one, that there are a few angels that are actually mentioned by name, right? Like there's
Yeah,
Michael, there's Gabriel.
Gabriel,
Uh,
Uriel is in the book of Enoch as well. There's
and
several others.
Gabriel has a very different role because he's more of a messenger, right?
Yeah, again, in the text that we have that would
Yeah.
be considered reliable, yes. But the problem becomes, we take these snapshots and assume that must be their only job.
Hmm. Yeah,
And I
true.
think that's one of angelology's biggest problems is it relies on so little information sometimes that I think we're making far too many assumptions. I have no problem saying, if you want to call something an angel that's a supernatural being on God's side, I have no problem with that. I think that's as
Hmm.
fine a description as you're going to get. The thing is, I think one of our biggest problems is we try to draw conclusions where we really don't have enough information to draw that conclusion from. And it leads to chaos, and we're trying to, which again leads us to picking at gnats, like Metatron, right? That's one I know you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up.
So Metatron is, again, not found anywhere in the text of anybody. He is created out of tradition, and the theology goes like, or the not even the theology, the ideology goes like this: we see an angel, the angel of the Lord, in the Old Testament, and when he speaks, he is speaking to humans in God's uh, in the name of God, but in first person, right? Instead of saying, like, if you were to send me to somebody, I would say, Donny Cho has sent me to tell you something,
Hmm.
right? And I would say, Donny says this. I would use you in the third person because I'm not you.
Hmm.
When other angels speak to people, it's always God in the third person because they are not God. However, we see throughout the Old Testament the angel of the Lord speaking in first person for God. It is all first person pronouns. And so this idea came as, well, okay, then that must be Metatron. And Metatron is the voice of God. And that's sort of the idea, right? The thing is, again, Heiser, again, go watch his stuff, go read his books. He does a great job on this. When you get to the New Testament, the idea of the Trinity is not a foreign concept, because it is actually pulling off of the two powers theology that was common theology in the Second Temple period. I know this sounds a little odd today, because we think, well, but the Jewish people don't, Jewish theology doesn't have a multiple person theology of God in the same way that New Testament Christians do, right? We have the Trinity, and they didn't. And he points out that's very much a lie, or that's just a lie. It is that this actually used to be, the idea of two powers in heaven used to be very common theology amongst the Jewish, particularly in the Second Temple period, amongst the Jewish scholars, which is why the Trinity was not a problem for anyone, right? Because you would think that if these Jewish radicals that we now call Christians were coming up with all new theology, everyone would be like, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about here." But they don't, because they understood what was happening. People even point out that in Isaiah, we essentially have the Trinity right there in Isaiah. But what was very commonly understood was that there was two Yahwehs, or two Jehovahs, right? Depending on how you translate the Tetragrammaton. And I'm pretty certain I mispronounced it, but I never pronounced anything correctly. I'm a Texan. And essentially it was saying, hey, there is the Jehovah that is not seen, and there's the Jehovah that is seen. So essentially, this angel of the Lord is the God that we get to interact with as physical beings, right? And then you have God, the God the Father, the highest one. You can't interact with him directly because we are sinful creatures, right? Again, Isaiah, when he's looking at the seraphim and he sees God, he's like, I'm gonna die. I can't be in God's presence. And they cleanse him with the coal, right? That's the whole thing. You're not supposed to be able to see God. God has to shield Moses when he walks past him, because he's like, you can't look on me and survive, right? You can't look directly at me and live, but I'll show you what I can. So Metatron is essentially was a way for people who didn't understand the two powers theology, and understand that was essentially the proto-Trinity being exposed in the Old Testament literature. Because for them, the Jewish scholars that they were interacting with at the time were rejecting the two powers theory because it supports Christians, the Christian Trinity ideology. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. So so if you look at God, you would die, right? You can't look at him directly.
Yeah.
Right. But if God were to show up to you, but he was wearing like a paper bag over his head, you could look at him, because he's technically got a paper bag over his head.
He would shield himself. Yeah, that's the entire point. Is that
so Metatron is the paper bag.
In a way, but if it's also, again, so it's the part of him. All right, I'm gonna get a little off, and some people are gonna be like, "What did he just say?" When we see images of God in heaven, that's still only a fraction of what he is.
Yeah.
Okay. He's actually, like, the reality of God is that he's outside of all, even heaven, because we think, well, that's the spiritual realm. That's where he lives. No, he's above that too. That's the part of him that can exist within the heavenly universe without destroying it. That's his way of dealing with us. Again, he's a Trinity. You have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Son is the part of him that actually created the material world, because Jesus is the Word, right? Jesus is the part of God that created the entire universe, which is why he interacts with us. That's his purpose. right? That's why he can interact with us. That's why he was the second power. He was the Yahweh, the Jehovah that could be seen by man. He was the
Mm,
angel of the Lord. He was the messenger of God. That's why he could speak for God in the first person, because he
yeah.
is God. But he's
Yeah.
the second member of the Trinity. But when people were trying to understand, when again in the Middle Ages, when European scholars were trying to figure this stuff out, the Jewish scholars they were dealing with and saying, "Hey, what's going on with the Old Testament? What's going on with Hebrew? Can you explain this to us?"
Mm.
They had already rejected they had rejected the Second Temple theology of the two powers idea because it supports
As a
Christian ideology.
reaction to Christianity.
Yes.
So they kind of
Hmm.
screwed with their own theology as some knee-jerk thing against these new Christians that are popping up.
Hmm.
Essentially, right? The way you're describing it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what Metatron sounds like to me? The more you describe it, the more you talk about it. Metatron reminds me a lot of the mouth of Sauron in Lord of the Rings. Remember that dude? When they go
Yeah.
through the
Yeah.
Black Gate and he's like
Yeah.
just the mouth and that's all he is. But you could
Yeah.
tell like he not
Hmm.
only just speaks for him, he's sort of like
Hmm.
he's literally Sauron's mouth, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
That's literally the idea that they created for Metatron. Actually,
Hmm.
Duke's got a great point. Normally, we get to question or to comments later in the show, but Duke's got a great point here, saying that Metatron is the version 2.0 of Enoch. Again, supposedly, but again, he's not wrong. That is one of the thoughts in the Christian tradition when because
Hmm.
they're trying to explain, well, then who or what is Metatron, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the thoughts was, okay, then that's because Enoch is translated, right? He's raptured, translated, he's glorified without dying. So the thought was, okay, if there's someone who has to come and speak for God, then it would be Enoch, right? Since he was a righteous man who was translated before the flood. Again, that is one idea that has been created to explain Metatron. The issue, though, is it's because we Europeans did not understand Second Temple theology.
Hmm.
It's trying to explain a problem that doesn't exist, right? In the same way, again, like a lot, all of these things are trying to explain problems that don't really exist. It's due to a misunderstanding of what's being said because cultural differences, right? And so it's like I said, the video that we referenced earlier, I've got nothing against that guy because everything he said was true from the perspective of this is what has existed within the Christian tradition for a
Yeah.
very, very long time. The problem is now that we've got better archaeology, we've got we've got really, really great scholarship going on with Second Temple theology. We can start seeing where we've made mistakes and why those mistakes were made. It was just because we didn't have access to this information. So people doing the best they could with what they had
Hmm.
couldn't really parse out what was really being said. That's really what a lot of angelology comes down to, is misunderstanding what the text is trying to tell us because we lack the context and the understanding of the language.
And there's just too many gaps, not
Hmm.
enough information. So
Yeah.
there are like these giant canyons, right, of gaps of
Mhm.
what we understand about him. So naturally, people are going to fill in the blanks, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to
Exactly.
attribute all these things. Where did okay? How about this? I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit on this, but I want to ask you this
Yeah.
one: the mainstream image of like of an angel, right? Like a
Yeah.
person with like white bird wings.
Yeah.
Where did that originally come from?
The Greeks. Well, actually, no,
Yeah.
no, not really the Greeks. It's so you could make the argument, right? From I guess from a
Mhm.
European perspective, yes, it comes from the Greeks. However, it's older than that, right? You have the idea of again the winged beings uh, in Sumerian and Akkadian artwork, right? Again,
Yeah.
most people will equate them to the Anunnaki. That's true for some of them, but not all of them, right? Um, but essentially, the idea is that wings mean flight, and flight means supernatural. Is sort
Yeah.
of the way to think of that. So it really initially when it started off, even with the Europeans, it wasn't saying they have literal wings. It's saying this makes them different because they go in the heavens, right? They can fly into the heavens. Therefore, so it was even for them it was symbolic. But the problem is over time we lost that understanding, and so we're like, oh, angels have wings even though they're never described as actually having wings. The only angelic beings described as having wings are the cherubim / seraphim, because they're the same thing. But that's it. Okay, there's one other section in Zechariah talks about women with wings, but that's a whole other kettle of fish that probably shouldn't even be addressed at the moment. But in general,
I was about to say a joke, but I refrained.
yeah, I know. I you know what? I appreciate that, Donnie. I do. However, that being said, it's again, angels are never really described as having wings. In fact, they're described as riding in chariots of fire. But they themselves are ministering spirits of fire, right? So again, it's a lot of this is just trying to allow us as physical three-dimensional beings to understand something that exists so far outside of us that we probably wouldn't even understand what we were looking at if we could really see them, right? They're not the Oraphim. That's a misunderstanding. But that being said, we probably wouldn't actually be able to really comprehend what we were looking at if we were to look at them in any other way. So they appear as humans to us so that we can actually, deal with them without probably dying of a heart attack.
Do you ever wonder if they're like, if you're nowadays when you're out, you're walking through a crowd, and then you just think to yourself, man, I wonder if there's like amongst all these people, one of them is just like looks like a random dude, but it's actually an angel.
That is a question we should probably ask a lot more often.
Yeah.
And then conversely, the opposite is probably true too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I try to be like nice to homeless people, because, it could be an angel dressed up as a homeless guy trying to test your virtue. So you're like, oh man, I think that person might be an angel in disguise, until, of course, you see that said homeless person pooping in the street and you're like, yeah, probably not an angel.
Yeah. It's like, oh, is he passed out? It's like, oh, look, he's passed out from from a fentanyl overdose. Should probably call an ambulance because I don't think he's going to fly away.
Yeah, I don't think angels do that.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't usually smoke. They don't usually do heroin, but that's the point, right?
Yeah.
They are ministering spirits. I think we spend a lot of time because we as not just modern humans, but as humans in general, we always pay attention to the wrong things. What matters is what are they doing and what is their ultimate purpose, which is to help us get closer to God. That's it, right? Let them do what they need to do. Like, yes, there are 7 archangels, right? When we get to Revelation, it talks about the archangels, all that. That's important, but it's less important than to understand that they exist to help us get closer to God. They are His heavenly. So you ask, why did God create angels? Why did God create humans? God wants a family. The angelic race is just His heavenly family. We humans are His earthly family. That's it. That's the end of the conversation. That's all He wants. Now, we all have roles and duties and jobs because that's what's best for us. We need to feel useful. They need to feel useful. They need to have something to do. I mean, think about it. How long can you take a vacation and just hang out on the beach drinking a Mai Tai? At a certain point, you're going to get bored, right? We feel better when we're accomplishing things. We were supposed to do His work on earth. They are supposed to do their work in heaven. And part of their job is to help us. Again, number one thing, get closer to God. That's it. Everything else, why focus on it? You wouldn't understand it if you saw it. Just accept the help every once in a while.
Yeah.
We need to get to y'all's comments and questions. I've been flagging some of them as we went, right? So I'm going to get the ones I flagged, but unfortunately it's hard to talk and watch the chat at the same time. So if I miss something, please don't take it personally. I'm just flagging what I can, where I can, when I can. Donnie helps out, but when we're going back and forth.
Well, okay. I mean, that's not true. I never flag comments. Simply because I don't want to be all clicky while during these shows, because I'm worried that something will explode on StreamYard. I'll be like, oh my God, I accidentally closed the whole thing. So I'm like staying away from my mouse.
I'm gonna get you trained one of these days. Okay, Glenn says that we should get you a couple of bottles of Lone Star and Pearl. I don't want to do that to him. Okay, I say this as a
What's
fifth generation
Pearl?
Texan.
Is
Don't
that
ask.
beer? Oh,
Yeah, essentially. Look, here's the thing. Texas has many fine things. Lone Star beer is just not great. I'm sorry. It's okay. I know people like it. If you like it, that's fine. I got no problems. I like stouts. I'm a more of a stout guy, right? Shiner Bock, I'm all about that. But Lone Star, I'm just not a big fan of. But that being said, there's time. We'll see what we can do. Mostly, I would like to see how he handles real Mexican food.
actually, I want to start Glenn's comment.
Okay, go ahead.
There we go.
There we go. Derek had to go run and grab a pizza. Heat up a pizza for the little ones. It better have pineapple on it. That's all I'm saying. Pineapple. It should. Wink at me asks, aren't angels as giant as our planet and they have to shrink themselves to come to Earth? That is a theory that has been placed out there. Here's the thing. We don't really know at all. And here's where it gets worse. Size may be entirely irrelevant to them. Again, if they are supernatural beings, size may not, the way we understand size, may not mean anything to them. I know that sounds like, but why would? Because they're in the same way that why don't you go around the turtles for the 8-bit Mario game, right? If you were to ask him to go around, he'd be like, what? That word would have no meaning to him. He only knows up and down, left and right. That's all he knows. Size may be one of those things that's just irrelevant to these beings. So maybe they are, but maybe size is just not a concept to them. I mean, they understand it for us, but for them, not really a thing. Wink at me says Michael sent Lucifer to hell, right? No, Satan is not in hell yet. Lucifer is also not Satan. That is the prophetic name of the Antichrist. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. But he hasn't done it yet. In fact, he won't do it at all. Now, Michael will cast Satan and all the disobedient angels out of heaven, which is 1/3 of them, and cast them to earth midway through the tribulation. That has not happened yet. So he'll cast them to earth, but it's 2 unnamed angels that chain up to Satan and throw him into the abyss, which is my favorite. It's like, seriously, again, just 2 random angels are the ones who chain them up.
2 randos. It was Billy and Bob. Bob the angel and Billy the angel. Yeah. Glenn points out that Metatron sounds like a Marvel character. I would have gone with, and Radio Vault actually goes where I would have gone, sounds more like a Transformer. Well, here's the thing. Yeah, basically. I mean, you're not wrong. And actually, there is a comic book character in DC called Metatron. He's one of the new gods created by Jack Kirby. So there you go. You're both right. Here's a good one. Grasshopper says Sumerian and Akkadian temples also align with Cygnus, which is a bird with wings. Yes, that is also true. And which is why when we see certain bird wings, a lot of times it is more, again, you should be looking at Cygnus. The thing is, in the context of the 4 pillars, it's north, south, east, west, and again, there's differing opinions as to how Ophiuchus should be translated or should be seen. Sometimes he's a man holding a serpent. Sometimes he's a man riding a dragon. Sometimes it's just the dragon. Sometimes it's the eagle. Like, this is where things, again, going back to that whole point of how do we, what was it that Isaiah was trying to tell us? And he was trying to tell us that Satan was a cherubim, right? That he was one of these things, which is why he calls the cherubim the seraphim. He's trying to build this connection of this serpentine language. You could make the argument that the reason that Ophiuchus went from being a serpent to being an eagle is because Satan's not on God's side anymore. That within that idea of that was part of the message. Essentially, he got replaced. So Hmm.
Again, that
So
is
then,
extrapolating out a little bit, but I don't think it's unfounded.
so just the only difference between seraphim and cherubim is just clever wordplay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wordplay too. Like when we see this a lot in the Old Testament, and we miss it because like where certain names are misspelled deliberately to have a different numerical value,
Hmm.
right? Like Ruth is misspelled until she's redeemed by Boaz, then her name is spelled differently, and the even though it sounds the same, the numerical value is has changed to be giving it a completed number. Um, but we also see names like this in the Old Testament where it's like it's clearly not the person's real name; it's a play on words to let you know what's happening. Like I'm trying to think of some. If I were to say, I didn't. Let's say I didn't like somebody, and I thought they were a scammer, right? And their name was Sam. I'd say, "Hey, it's scam," right?
Yeah.
Hey, come over here. And I use scam as a noun. I'm telling you what I think about this guy, right? By changing the name. That's what's happening in Isaiah. He's changed the name from cherubim to seraphim an entendre so we're not, well, again, not really we, the original audience would understand what he was saying and
Hmm.
connect Satan to those cherubim. Winkemy says Raphael, one of the named archangels from Enoch, helped Solomon build the first temple and gave him a ring that controlled the demons, and they built the temple. That is again mythology. Yeah, that is found within mythology. The problem is it's not biblical, and it's not even really that material isn't even found in things like the Apocrypha. It is stuff that developed much later. So I tend not to give anything that's written after like the first, after year 1000 AD, I tend to give less credence to, because you're at that point, everyone's just so separated from the culture, and you start having a lot of, I don't want to call it fan fiction, but it's really what you get a lot is
See, I have a different point of view on
that
that.
name.
I
Mm-hmm.
think that really happened, but yeah, that
It may
wasn't
have.
actually. I think it really happened, but it wasn't actually Raphael who gave him that ring. I think
Mm-hmm.
it was an extraterrestrial. I think it was an extraterrestrial came down, and people thought it was Raphael because it was like this extraterrestrial with like this exalted being, and I think it did give Solomon that ring, and I think it did help him create demons and use them to build
Are,
his temple, and I think that ring was some kind of extraterrestrial technology, sir.
are you saying Solomon was a Green Lantern?
Yo, I think we may have just blown everyone's minds.
What I love is how many people are actually thinking you're serious and how many people think you're trolling, because we'll never know. Here's the
You
problem, guys.
never
You will
know.
never know.
You
You'll
never
never
know.
know when he's trolling you half the time. But essentially, so your thought is that he was Earth's first Green Lantern. On the bad side of today, Glenn says on the idea that angels, again, that we run across angels, we don't
Yeah.
necessarily know them. He says, for his luck, it'd be a guy he told to f off. Well,
Well, this is
unfortunately, there
why
may
I
be a lot
wanted
of people in that particular
this is why I wanted to start that
category.
because I wanted to ask you a personal question, Jason
Yeah,
McLean. Do you get road rage? Not
I
like,
try not to.
but do
Hmm.
you get like emotional when there's a bad driver on the road? And sometimes you might
Yeah,
just let a
yeah.
finger kind of slowly raise in the air,
Hmm.
give them half a peace sign, if you know what I mean. And so this thing I fear
Hmm.
the most is like, what if I go in when I, go over to the other side and they do the life review and you're getting,
Yeah.
they do the orientation for welcome to the afterlife, right? Oh, and then
Yep.
Jesus, that's when you first meet Jesus and like all the celebrities and dead family members. And then this angel comes up and he's like, "Hey, do you remember me?" I'm like, "No." And he's gonna be like, "Here." And then it'll flash to a memory where I'd like flip some random dude off. And angel's like, "Yeah, I was that guy. I was here to test you and you failed."
I love it.
I
And
worry about that.
here's the worst part. You may be right. That may be the truest thing you've said ever. Like that may literally be something that happened. So, guys, be nice to people on the road.
Yeah, be nice.
I would like to end on a high note. Radio Vault says he's got 800. He has almost 800 subscribers.
Whoa.
Good for you, Radio Vault.
Nice.
Congratulations. Always nice to end on a good high note. I think so. So congratulations, Radio Vault. And I guess one main thing to take away from this is don't flip off random people. You never know.
You never know.
Because they're not going to look like spinning eyeball wheels with wings. They're going to look like average normal person.
Mm-hmm.
So just be nice to one another every once in a while. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, do what Bill and Ted said. They had it right. Be excellent to one another. All right. On that note, y'all, the way to get this channel to go is you got to share it out. Share it with your friends and your enemies. And yeah, for those who do like the lives that I'm doing, I'm going to do an extra one tonight. Normally, I just do them on Mondays and Thursdays. I'm going to do an extra one tonight because honestly, there's kind of a lot building. We're doing sort of a little bit of a series. They're 5, 10, 15 minutes sometimes. Just thoughts that are coming off the top of my head about what's happening in the news since we only do this as a weekly show. So share that stuff out. It's meant to be shared. And I do clip out the section, the primary section of each video to give y'all something to share. So it's like, hey, some people don't want to share out a whole hour and a half video or an hour video, but some people will sit around for a 15-minute video. Inflict us upon your family and friends. And on that note, we will catch y'all next time. Helps if I actually push the button here. There we are. Thanks for watching Jason McLean Questions Everything. We're live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. Please share this video with your friends, then like, follow, and subscribe for more.